Buenas noches, probando sonido, un, dos, tres.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I'm okay, but I stay. I put on a white shirt and a tie and my jacket. Uh, okay. So WhatsApp, we disconnect now. So I'll stay online, right? Okay. Okay.
Ok. Muy buenas noches para todos. Quiero empezar por agradecer su asistencia. Es una alegría inmensa tenerlos aquí. Y a continuación eh, continuando con el desarrollo del programa de transformación gran colombiana, un proyecto avanzada para enfrentar los desafíos de la educación de cara al siglo XXI. Mi nombre es Franklin Asprilla, yo soy egresado de la Universidad de la Gran Colombia, soy el coordinador del Acuerdo de Cooperación Estratégico que ha firmado la Universidad de la Gran Colombia con la firma de consultoría Ascendia y socio estratégico Power Integral Solution. Para mí es de mucha alegría volver al país para ayudar a la universidad en todo lo que es su proceso de internacionalización. Hoy vamos a hacer presentación de lo que es la tercera conferencia internacional. Ya hicimos dos conferencias internacionales, la una sobre oportunidades en el uso de tecnología, la segunda sobre aquello de que cuando creemos en algo y nos los proponemos, podemos lograr todas nuestras metas y propósitos. Hoy esta tercera conferencia internacional, pues se está transmitiendo a través de YouTube, a través de Zoom. Tenemos un conferencista canadiense con mucha experiencia, más de muchos años de experiencia en Venezuela. Hoy nos va a hablar desde México porque está con algunos negocios en México. Y esta conferencia pues tiene asistencia presencial de ustedes aquí. En la ciudad de Armenia están conectados virtualmente, por supuesto. Hay estudiantes, profesores, cuerpos administrativos e invitados especiales. La conferencia Venezuela, un área de oportunidades para la Universidad de la Gran Colombia. El nombre de nuestro conferencista, Barry Block. Barry es un emprendedor con más de 45 años de experiencia. Como especialista en desarrollo de negocios en etapas tempranas, enfocado en instruir tecnologías canadienses e inversionistas en la industria energética de América Latina. Venezuela, por supuesto, representa un ejemplo tangible para la Universidad de la Gran Colombia, porque combina riesgo, oportunidad y la necesidad de conocimiento aplicado. Es el país con la mayor reserva probadas de petróleo del mundo, con aproximadamente 303 mil millones de barriles, equivalente a cerca del 17% de las reservas de petróleo globales. Su proceso de reapertura económica está generando nuevas oportunidades para la inversión extranjera y la cooperación internacional. Sectores como energía, logística, telecomunicaciones, salud y, por supuesto, educación superior son vistos como áreas prioritarias de crecimiento. Para la Universidad de la Gran Colombia, esto representa posibilidades reales de investigación aplicada, consultoría y transferencia de tecnología, además de fortalecer alianzas estratégicas entre academia, empresa y gobierno. Los estudiantes pueden vincularse con proyectos reales de innovación, emprendimiento y expansión regional, desarrollando una visión global y práctica. Esto convierte a Venezuela en un laboratorio vivo para formar líderes con pensamiento internacional. Mirar a Venezuela no es solo analizar una crisis, sino prepararse como país y como universidad para participar activamente en su reconstrucción y crecimiento futuro. BlackBerry es un ejecutivo internacional con más de 45 años de experiencia en desarrollo estratégico de negocios en el sector energético, conectando la experiencia técnica de Norteamérica con oportunidades de alto impacto en América Latina. Su trayectoria se ha enfocado especialmente en Argentina y Venezuela, donde ha liderado proyectos complejos en petróleo y gas, enfrentando con éxito entornos políticos desafiantes y mercados altamente volátiles. Es especialista en la estructuración de joint venture internationals, facilitando alianzas entre compañías canadienses de producción y servicios con empresas energéticas latinoamericanas, incluyendo relaciones estratégicas con gobiernos y compañías nacionales como PDVSA. Berry ha liderado la comercialización e implementación de tecnologías avanzadas en recuperación mejorada de petróleo, sísmica, perforación, completamiento de pozos y recuperación de crudos pesados. Su experiencia incluye la negociación de concepciones energéticas en la cuenca San Jorge en Argentina y el desarrollo de oportunidades técnicas en la faja petrolífica del oriente del Orinoco en Venezuela. Actualmente, Berry está enfocado en reactivar los intereses empresariales canadienses en Venezuela, aprovechando los recientes cambios en el panorama geopolítico y las nuevas oportunidades de inversión energética. Paralelamente, lidera importantes oportunidades de producción en Argentina mediante Surcana Energy Inc. y Alianza Petrolera S.A., consolidando su visión de largo plazo para el desarrollo energético regional. Su experiencia, visión y estrategia y su visión estratégica y profundo conocimiento del entorno latinoamericano lo convierten en una voz autorizada para analizar las oportunidades de inversión y cooperación internacional en Venezuela. La conferencia será presentada en inglés, pero contamos con la colaboración de los doctores Edwin Álvarez y John Dueñas, de la Facultad de la Licenciatura de Lenguas Modernas. Ellos nos van a ayudar con la traducción simultánea y esperamos lo disfruten. Barry, thank you so much for joining us. We want to be very thankful and appreciate your generosity to share your experience, the past, the present, and the future in Venezuela. For the Gran Colombia University, and in particular for Ascendia Consulting, it's a privilege having you here today. There is no secret about your experience, knowledge, and perspectives about Venezuela. So thank you so much for taking out time to enjoy with us. We are really excited about having you here. So the audience is excited, waiting for listen to you, everything you have to add today. Thank you so much, and the microphone is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. I thank you, Franklin and Jorge and your team inviting me to speak to such a distinguished audience. And I've done a little research into the university, and I can see that you are not focused on the oil and gas industry, which is generally the audience that I am talking with when I'm traveling in Latin America. I apologize for speaking in English. I like to say that hablo español, pero hablo como Tarzán. So, a veces es muy difícil para mí expresarme en español. So, I appreciate having professional translators translate from my English. To give you a little background, I had a lot of experience in different industries in Canada before I got into the oil and gas industry in 1979. My degree is in business. I have a management degree, and then I had professional training in sales and marketing from Xerox of Canada before I by accident got into the oil and gas industry. From then, it's been a tremendous adventure, and as you probably most of you are aware, the oil and gas industry has been like riding a roller coaster for many years, and it's been very frustrating at times to invest a lot of time, energy, and money in trying to develop projects that end up not being workable because of things like dramatic drops in oil prices. So in as a result of that, after about 10 years of being in the industry, I ended up on my first trip to Latin America in 1991. And I started representing a seismic company called Technica Petroleum Services, which was started by one of Canada's top geophysicists, who was married to a Colombian lady, and did a lot of business in Latin America. He was highly recognized by Ecopetrol, by Petróleos de Venezuela, by Petrobras, YPF, and I had the privilege of in January 1991 traveling first to Buenos Aires, where I followed up a lot of work that this gentleman, his name was Roy Linseth, that he had done throughout the continent. After starting in Buenos Aires, I worked my way up the continent, visiting mainly the national oil companies, and I ended up in Bogota in the third week of January of 91. And from Bogota, after meeting with Ecopetrol, I flew to Caracas on Super Bowl Sunday, 1991. I ended up meeting my wife in a sports bar in Caracas. And after a couple of years of dating and traveling back and forth between Canada and Venezuela, I decided that I would live in Caracas and enjoy the experience of being in a different part of the world with a beautiful woman ready to have my children. And although, unfortunately, the marriage didn't work really well for a number of reasons, and we ended up with two beautiful children who are now adults, and my daughter is here in Mexico City. My son is currently in Buenos Aires. So going back to the story, I ended up moving to Caracas in October of '92. After we got married, and then I started focusing on presenting technologies from the Canadian industry to Petróleos de Venezuela and their subsidiaries at the time, Corpoven, Logoven, and Meraven. And it was exciting because one of the technologies I was presenting was horizontal drilling. At that time, there were no horizontal wells in Colombia and in Venezuela or anywhere else in Latin America. And now horizontal wells, of course, are very essential. They're very commonly used in the industry, but technology has continued to evolve. I ended up participating in the opening, the apertura of the Venezuelan industry that really started in 1991 and 92. And then in 1996, the start of the third round of marginal fields allowed me to put together two consortia that participated in that round. You're probably not overly familiar with it, especially the younger students in the audience, but that was the most successful round or bidding round in the history of oil and gas. The Venezuelan government earned $1.2 billion in bonus signing bonuses from the oil companies that participated in the round, and took a total of roughly 35 marginal fields at that time. Unfortunately, I had two consortia that I put together for the round, but neither one was successful. And I then focused on bringing a group of Canadian service companies and engineering companies to provide services to the winners of those blocks or those fields that were awarded in that round. Should I ask, are the translators with me at this point? Am I being clear? Everybody understanding me? I assume that the answer is yes. Anyway, at that time, the Venezuelan industry was starting to focus on developing the Faja del Orinoco, which of course has the most reserves almost anywhere in the world on its own. But the problem was the Orinoco has very heavy, viscous oil that is very difficult to produce using the technology that existed at the time. And so that began a series of joint ventures with major oil companies, Chevron, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and a series of other companies who invested tremendous amounts of money developing blocks in the Faja del Orinoco. I was involved primarily in promoting technologies that had been developed in Canada, in the oil sands in Canada, which is the third largest reserves in the world. So I was promoting those technologies as methods of increasing production in the Faja del Orinoco. While that was all happening, of course, oil prices continued their erratic behavior. In 1999 or in 1998, the oil prices collapsed, and at the same time, in December of 1998, Hugo Chavez was elected president of Venezuela, and he was inaugurated in February of 1999. I was at that time waiting for the results of the election, and the Canadian government actually gave me a contract to write a report on the Venezuelan oil and gas industry. And I delivered that report 2 months after Chavez was elected. And then things started changing fairly rapidly. The major oil companies not only were investing in the Faja del Orinoco, but all of these other oil companies that had got or bought the rights to develop mature fields, they were also investing tremendous amounts of money in developing those fields, while the majors again were developing big blocks in the Orinoco. The money that was being invested at the time included roughly $13 billion that was invested in the development of 4 upgraders that were developed on the coast of Venezuela near Jose, and those upgraders were meant to upgrade the oil from the Orinoco to levels that the oil could be then refined in refineries around the world to higher API standards. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the fact that some of these terms are probably not known to the audience. Anyway, in 2002, everything changed again with the coup attempt on Hugo Chavez. He came back, but then he ended up punishing the opposition in Petróleos de Venezuela and ended up firing roughly 20,000 of a workforce of 40,000 people. And so those people were forced to leave the country. Either they were allowed to stay if they signed agreements that they would never go on strike again, they wouldn't oppose the government, or they were forced to leave the country so that they could continue to work in the oil and gas industry. That was a gift that Hugo Chavez gave to the Canadian oil and gas industry and to the Middle Eastern countries and other countries in Latin America, including, of course, Colombia. A lot of these Venezuelans went and were able to apply their knowledge and everything to the development of heavy oil in Colombia. And so that a great example of that was Pacific Rubiales. They became the second largest producer of oil in Colombia after Ecopetrol, based on the development of the heavy oil reserves in Los Llanos at that time. Several thousand of these PDVSA employees went to Canada and helped Canada develop the oil sands. And like I say, that was a gift because these people had a lot of knowledge, education, and experience in the Venezuelan fields that they were able to help apply to the Canadian fields. I continued to be or live in Caracas, even though things were falling apart, because I was at that point, unfortunately, divorced from my wife, but we had the two small children, and I wanted to stay and be a parent to my children. So I continued to work on promoting technologies from the Canadian industry in Venezuela, but I also spent a lot of time in Argentina, in Brazil, some time in Colombia, also trying to develop projects utilizing these technologies in developing reserves in each of these countries. One of the most prominent technologies that I was involved in initially was steam-assisted gravity drainage. That was a technology that allowed for the injection of steam into heavy oil reservoirs. So the steam caused the viscosity of the oil to be reduced so it would flow and come to the surface where it was diluted and then continued on to upgraders. At the same time, I was involved in a new technology, which was in situ combustion. And that was a technology that I helped introduce to a company called Petrobank in Canada. And it led to the development of petrominerales in Colombia. And there's a whole history of these companies and how they developed over time. Some very successfully for a while, and then they developed problems because of industry conditions, oil prices, and political issues, or just in some cases their own management problems. Anyway, it was a process that I went through, a history that I experienced, that I can end up writing books about someday if I have the opportunity. Just checking my notes here. I I ended up returning to Canada in 2009 when Hugo Chavez expropriated all of the service companies in Western Venezuela, while I was working with a few investors on taking over a manufacturing company in Barquisimeto in the state of Lara in Venezuela. That company manufactured downhole mechanical pumps. And we were doing our due diligence when Chavez expropriated all the service companies. We decided to let that opportunity go because we were afraid that if we bought the company and made it successful, that the government would just take it away from us. So I decided to return to Canada to reestablish my tax residency in Canada and get my children out of Venezuela, which ultimately happened. At the same time, other countries were experiencing their own political changes and everything, including Argentina, where I had spent time again trying to develop projects there. And at the same time, Argentina was going through changes that led to finally the election of Mauricio Macri in November of 2015. However, he lasted, or his term lasted for 2 years, and then he lost support from in Congress, and his last 2 years he was very ineffective. At roughly the same time, of course, Nicolas Maduro had taken over from Hugo Chavez in Venezuela when Chavez died, and there was a lot of protests, and ultimately Juan Guaido took over as interim president in January of 2019, and he lasted as interim president until the end of 2021. And at that point, I again was working with a few Canadian investors and oil companies to be able to go into Venezuela and help rebuild the industry when that happened, or when the government actually changed. It didn't. They weren't successful, and so I ended up focusing on, in 2022, 2023, focusing on other opportunities, including another opportunity in Argentina. And finally, we're getting to kind of where we are now. So I think that everybody is aware of the current situation in Venezuela, where in January of 2025, the Americans went in and captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and took them out of the country, and left Delcy Rodriguez in power as first interim president, but now they've recognized her as the president, even though in July of 2024, Edmundo Gonzalez had won the presidential election as proxy for Maria Corina Machado. And I think that's the situation we're facing now, is that the change is not coming as fast as a lot of Venezuelans would like, mainly because Donald Trump decided that having the oil of Venezuela was more important than restoring the democracy, a democratic government, and so Maria Corina is currently on the sidelines waiting for the U.S. government to authorize, if you will, general elections. So I think a lot of Venezuelans at this point were initially very happy that Maduro was gone, but now they're very concerned that maybe their country will be taken over or controlled by the Americans going forward. It's really unclear at this point in time. How that's affected the oil and gas industry is frustrating because um, um, the situation is so uncertain that major investors are not too willing to invest money in Venezuela until the political situation is clarified. So the current situation is like I say, it's complex. What the American government is saying is that they want to have an initial period where the country is stabilized, the economy is stabilized, and then they can begin economic recovery, which would depend on investors being willing to go to the country and put the money into all the projects that will require to rebuild the industry there. At which point, the third phase would be a political transition that would begin with the general elections. When that will happen is unclear at this point in time. My best guess is that in early 2027, they could have elections. Personally, I believe that if the elections are held freely and fairly, that Maria Corina could be the next president of Venezuela. And she has a large team of people who will be running first of all, the oil and gas industry, which is the only major source of revenue the country has, and would allow for private investors to come into other sectors of the economy to help to rebuild the country and generate a healthy economy. Again, my guess is at this point in time, we have to wait at least a few more months to understand how that process is going to continue and how it will affect neighboring countries, especially Colombia, Brazil, and other countries in America Latina. Going to what will be required, what is tremendously required in Venezuela are people. The country will need to restore a workforce in their oil and gas industry, but also with all the people who have left the country, there is a lack of educated, experienced people in every sector. And I think that that's part of the reason that my friends Jorge and Franklin are talking to your university about how maybe your university will be able to participate in rebuilding Venezuela and creating opportunities there for not only investors, of course, but the people who will be working every day rebuilding or doing the work that's required to rebuild the country. Let me just check my notes here, make sure I'm trying to cover everything I thought was important. The other major area that will require a huge amount of investment and a lot of expertise and experience is just rebuilding the infrastructure throughout the country, not just in the oil and gas industry, where there are hundreds of different kinds of processing plants that have been allowed to deteriorate and are not working now, The 4 upgraders I told you about before, they cost a total of $13 billion. Only one of those is working right now, and it's not at full capacity. The others will probably have to be, if not totally rebuilt, they're going to require a huge amount of investment to get them working again. All of the other facilities in the country, surface facilities for oil and gas especially, will either have to be rebuilt or replaced. And so I see a huge opportunity there for people from Colombia and companies from Colombia to participate in that activity. My understanding is your university is involved or has a number of faculties that could participate also in Venezuela, but that's not my area of expertise. All I can say is that universities in Venezuela have suffered through the last 25 years, and they've lost professors, they've lost students, they have not had the funding required to maintain, consistent and healthy educational programs, and there's very possibly the opportunity for bilateral or binational cooperation to help them recover and expand their activities and yours as well into other sectors of the economy. Healthcare, education, of course, are fundamental in any healthy economy, but there are now new opportunities based on the application of artificial intelligence as an example. Many more areas of activity. Again, I shouldn't get too deep into talking about those things because that's not my area of expertise. I see it. We're now at 6:07, and I have covered, I think, most of what I would like to talk about. Although one thing that maybe I can stress also is the amount of money, assuming the political situation is resolved in a satisfactory way and investors are willing to go back into Venezuela and start to work there, there's going to be a huge amount of money required in Venezuela to get their industry back to where it was in 1999 when I wrote that report for the Canadian government. At that time, Venezuela was producing 3.4 million barrels a day of oil. And today, they've recovered from during the pandemic, there was 400,000 barrels a day of production. Now I think averaging close to 1 million barrels a day. But to get from 1 million barrels a day back up to 3.5 million barrels a day is going to take well over $100 billion worth of investment. And that's not just in the oil and gas activities themselves. It would be all of the indirect activity that is going to be required. A huge need for qualified, experienced, and educated people. At that point, I think I pretty much said everything that I would want to say. I hope that I've been making sense. Franklin, if you're there, are you going to be taking the floor again?
Yeah, I'm here, buddy. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. It's very clear. So you walk us through what is the past, the present, what is you hope to see in Venezuela in the coming future. So we really appreciate it. Now we want to provide time for a couple questions here in the audience. So let us get Professor Edwin Alvarez, who is going to help us. And we are going to take some questions from the audience and let you know exactly what the people want to know from you. Pues agradecemos a Barry por la presentación. Yo creo que nos queda una contextualización mucho más amplia de lo que ha pasado, lo que está pasando y lo que él cree que puede ocurrir en Venezuela en los próximos años. ¿Ustedes tienen alguna pregunta? ¿Alguien tiene alguna curiosidad, alguna inquietud que quieran transmitirle a Barry? Aquí el profesor Edwin Álvarez nos va a ayudar con la traducción y poder transmitir las preguntas a él.
Buenas noches.
Barry, aquí tenemos la primera pregunta. Un momento, por favor.
Thank you, Barry. This is George. Just I want to first of all thank you to you for all the Barry's living experience of all the oil is about. He's a Canadian. He has a largest 45 years of experience and very knowledgeable about Venezuela. The point that I want to highlight is, guys, you as university students has one of the greatest opportunities in your life, and it is something that you need to think and you need to take advantage, looking to the future. Perdona, voy a cambiar, Barry, en español. Ustedes como estudiantes de la Universidad Gran Colombiana tienen una oportunidad muy interesante. ¿Por qué interesante? Porque primero, Venezuela tiene las reservas petroleras certificadas más grandes del mundo. Ustedes ven los carros de la Arabia Saudita y que allá los jeques, los jaques, etcétera, tienen carros, tienen plantaciones, tienen lo que tienen. Pues los venezolanos son más ricos porque tienen mayores reservas petroleras. 300 billones de barriles de petróleo, que eso es mucho dinero, por un lado. En segundo, en los próximos 10 años, con la reconstrucción, viene la reconstrucción de Venezuela, reconstrucción, y se van a invertir, como Barry dijo, se van a invertir 100 billones de dólares, 100 billones de dólares, y esa se puede convertir en la más grande inversión en la historia de la humanidad, la más grande inversión de la historia de la humanidad. Entonces, cuando hay dinero, se generan oportunidades, pero cuando hay oportunidades para capitalizarlas, uno debe estar preparado. Si no está preparado, pues no va a capitalizar esa oportunidad. Entonces, ¿cuál es el mensaje y cuál es lo que quisimos transmitir aquí? Lo que quisimos transmitir es que con el programa que están haciendo, con toda la reactivación que la universidad está teniendo en la parte de nuevas tecnologías, creando una mentalidad exportadora, porque lógicamente si hay plata allá en Venezuela, pues salen a comprar porque no tienen industria. Si hay alguien, si tenemos proyectos aquí en Colombia que podamos exportar, que podamos apoyarlos, pues lógicamente vamos a tener un mercado. Y teniendo un mercado, un comprador con dinero, pues se van a hacer las cosas, porque eso es lo que estamos planteando. Entonces, para resumir, es que ustedes como estudiantes ahorita tienen una oportunidad única. Se vuelve a los años de Carlos Andrés Pérez, en los años 70, 75, cuando muchos colombianos emigraron a Venezuela y venían con mucha plata. Esos fenómenos se van a transmitir, pero mucho más rápido porque estamos en un periodo muy corto de avance de la tecnología. Entonces, eso es muy importante. Entonces, le voy a hacer la pregunta a Barry. Barry, the only question that I have for you is what would be the main advice that you can provide to these young people here at the university to prepare to take advantage and opportunity in the future for the rebuilding of Venezuela? That would be the only question. What would be the
Jorge,
main advice?
¿Tú podrías, por favor, hacer la pregunta en español para que la audiencia la entienda y el profesor la pueda traducir?
Sí, prácticamente le estoy diciendo, Barry, ¿cuál es el mayor recomendación que le puede dar a ustedes la juventud de Colombia, la juventud de la Universidad Gran Colombia, para que se tome ventaja hacia el futuro de esta reconstrucción de Venezuela? Esa es la pregunta.
No, traduce por favor en inglés.
You already understood. Do you understand the question? Well,
Yes. I think that's an interesting question because, at my age, especially with kids, my own kids who are young adults now, I hate giving advice, but Some of the best advice I ever received was to stay organized. I would say stay organized. Pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the world right now because things are changing rapidly, and with artificial intelligence becoming a dominant factor in the world, um, I think you first of all have to just pay attention every day to what's going on. Study hard, do well at school and everything, but stay organized too. I think that the secret to being successful over time is not only doing everything that you say you're going to do, but doing it well, and that means you know maintaining your to-do lists and everything based on what you're learning, learning not only as you're going through your education, but when you get out in the world and while you're going to school, paying attention to what's going on in the world today. It's a very frustrating time in world history, and it's going to affect us all. It's going to definitely affect what you're able to pursue and accomplish in your futures. I'm sorry, I'm rambling there. I'll stop. I hope that I made some sense.
Bueno, pues él nos permite estar atentos, nos pide que estemos muy atentos frente a los cambios que generalmente se dan en el mundo. Creo que la frase que él resume es mantengámonos organizados y atentos a lo que está pasando. Es activar la atención a los cambios de la tecnología, prestar atención a los cambios sociales y políticos que nos ofrece el mundo. Realmente el secreto del éxito que tenemos justamente hoy en día es el hecho de prestar atención y muy atentos a lo que está pasando en el mundo. Eso es quizás lo que más nos permite prestar atención a aquellos cambios que se están dando y pues obviamente activar la atención muy clara al detalle para poder obviamente mirar y leer de qué manera podemos actuar ante los distintos retos que se nos afronta y obviamente que con esta reactivación pues estamos muy atentos también para abordar.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Aquí, por favor. Tenemos una segunda pregunta, Barry. Un momento, por favor.
Muy buenas noches. Uno de los problemas más, bueno, de las situaciones o de las condiciones más importantes para que un país se desarrolle suele ser su historia, ¿no? La dependencia de la trayectoria o path dependence, como se suele tratar en la literatura sobre el desarrollo. Mi pregunta es muy específica y es cómo el conferencista cree que Venezuela puede salir precisamente de esa inercia que lo lleva a mantenerse en un estado o en una situación de estado fallido, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Porque ese movimiento inercial en las organizaciones siempre las lleva a mantenerse abajo, por su misma dependencia de la trayectoria o path dependence. ¿Cómo cree el conferencista que Venezuela puede salir del hueco? Es un poco eso.
Bien. Gracias.
Okay, this question is more related to Venezuelan history, and the main question is considering the development of history and also like a concept that is according to, well, is determined like peace dependence. How do you consider that Venezuela can overcome the actual state in order to overcome all the difficulties and now to switch to a progressive perspective?
That's a very interesting question, and I think that my answer would be that Venezuelans have gone through the last 25 years where they were forced to change the way they think. And as you remember, Venezuela at one point was such a rich country that Venezuelans, their money was worth a lot. high exchange rates. They could travel to Venezuela. I remember one of the first stories I heard when I first moved there was about dame dos. The Venezuelans had so much money they'd go to Miami on shopping trips and ask what the price of something was, and when they heard the price, they'd say, "Oh, well, that's cheap. Dame dos, dame dos." And so there was a certain arrogance that came from being in a rich country, or a country that had economic benefits for the people who were best prepared, more educated, that had good jobs. But in a lot of cases, those people were not as or didn't pay as much attention to the rest of society. They didn't look after the rest of the people in the country, and then when times became hard for everybody, they suffered more. Now they recognize that they should have been more aware of what was going on politically, socially, economically in the country, and not just taking advantage of the fact that they had wealth that wasn't evenly distributed. So there are a lot of Venezuelans who left the country who now will be going back, some of them will be going back to help rebuild their countries, but with a different mentality, where they care now more about contributing to the to the health of everybody in the country, not just their personal wealth, or sorry, I'm kind of wallowing there. But if you get the idea, I personally, I live with a sense of purpose. I really care about everybody in the country. And as a great example, Colombia has experienced an inflow of what, over 1 million Venezuelans, a lot of whom are among the poorest Venezuelans, who had to leave their country and walk out to find opportunities in neighboring countries so that they could feed their families. And now some of those people will be able to go back and get jobs and be fairly compensated and relieve the stress that migration has put on Colombia and other countries in Latin America. I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'm getting into too much soul searching.
Bueno, él reconoce que fueron 25 años de cambio de pensamiento. Antiguamente lo reconocíamos a Venezuela como un país muy rico, casi que comparado en su parte de comercio con Miami. Habían muchos beneficios para los inversionistas. Sin embargo, pues hubo un cambio en el sentido de que no se cuidaba realmente las personas del país. Cuando realmente los tiempos se pusieron difíciles, pues se dieron cuenta lo mucho que se necesitaba que todos tuvieran una buena estabilidad. Él sugiere que justamente el hecho de volver a reconstruir Venezuela, a reconstruir nuevamente una nueva mentalidad, unos nuevos principios, no solamente para un sector que se beneficie, sino que pues todos los sectores de la sociedad puedan tener una equidad y nuevas oportunidades. Él comenta que pues desde nuestra experiencia como Colombia, pues también tenemos muchas cosas que también podemos compartir nosotros desde nuestra experiencia también con nuestros problemas internos también. Y pues obviamente es caminar juntos por unas nuevas oportunidades para construir nueva colaboración y pues obviamente pues encaminar unos nuevos proyectos y unas nuevas metas que se puedan construir como naciones. One more question.
Yo creo que es una última pregunta, por favor, Barry.
Muy buenas noches. Me permiten leer, que mi inglés es un poco lento, pero quiero intentar hacerla directamente en inglés. First of all, thank you for such an engaging talk and for sharing for your perspective with us today. Thank you so much. Looking at the Venezuelan corporate landscape, we've seen how companies have had to quickly promote younger or less experienced staff to fill the gaps left by immigration. In this context, what role do soft skills and adaptive leadership play in preventing economic stagnation? And what strategies should companies implement right now to build a workforce capable of driving long-term economic recovery? Thank you.
I don't know, Barry, do you need a repetition or is okay? Do you understand the question?
I think I understood everything, and I thank you for that question. It's important. Well, now we're talking about corporate development and the need for not just companies, but the owners, the shareholders of those companies to have more commitment to not just developing their workforce, but contributing to the overall good of society. To be honest, I don't know how important those issues are to a lot of company owners and shareholders generally in Latin America. I know a lot of business people in different countries in Latin America who are very responsible and care very much about the success and the personal development of their employees. I think that's got to be more emphasized in corporate culture everywhere in the world, not just Latin America, not just in Colombia or Venezuela. A lot of times the making money is perceived as being the number one responsibility of management and is to deliver a return to their shareholders. I personally believe that's important, of course, but you can deliver a more significant return to shareholders by developing the workforce so they're more productive, so they're more effective. Above all, that they're happy doing what they're doing, that they feel that the role they're playing is important, not just to the company, but to them and to their families and to their neighbors and everything. So I would love to have a drink with you sometime, sir, and talk about those things. But I hope that's a good enough answer for you. Thank you for asking.
Sí. Bueno, básicamente habla sobre la responsabilidad que se tienen obviamente desde el emprendimiento y desde las empresas para retornar pues todo lo adquirido justamente a la sociedad. Algunas veces pues es visto el hecho de hacer negocios pues, de una manera como muy oportunista, pero luego lo considera como una oportunidad también para retornar y invertir nuevamente en la sociedad. Sin embargo, pues él encuentra pues también otros detalles que de pronto podrían estar discutiendo tomándose un café para poder revisar muy bien a detalle aquellos aspectos que pueden justamente potenciar pues obviamente las compañías dentro de un aspecto más social y político dentro de un país.
Okay, thank you so much, Barry, for your presentation. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. I think it's really great. We really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, but taking time for us today from Mexico is really a blessing to us. So thank you so much. I hope to see you soon in Calgary. God bless you.
Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias una vez más por su asistencia. No quisiera irme sin agradecer una vez más a los profesores Edwin Álvarez y John Dueñas por la traducción de la charla del día de hoy. Los invitamos mañana a las 8 de la mañana para nuestra presentación sobre egresados y para que sigan presenciando todos los eventos que estamos haciendo en este proceso de transformación gran colombiana. Gracias por su tiempo, una feliz noche y un fuerte abrazo para todos.